Welcome to Diversity Conversations, where we engage in thought-provoking dialogue to identify leadership solutions to today's most challenging conflicts. Stream live each week, Saturday 9:30 a.m. to 11 a.m. Hosted by Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategist and CEOs Eric Ellis and Tommy Lewis. Join us and add your voice to this engaging diversity conversation.
Good morning, Greater Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky, the United States, and the world. My name is Eric Ellis, and I'm the President and CEO of Integrity Development Corporation.
And I'm Tommy Lewis, President and CEO of Make It Plain Consulting. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning, Tommy, man. What's good? What's good, hey, Tommy?
So it's been a good day. I got back into Cincinnati, Eric, last evening. This morning, actually, at 1 o'clock this morning. Flew in from North Carolina. We had a delay leaving Greensboro.
Okay.
We had a delay connecting in Atlanta. We arrived in Cincinnati at 12:30. We got to the house around 1:30 a.m. and I popped back up this morning around 7 o'clock so I can come into Diversity Conversations.
Them DEI planes?
Oh, no!
They still falling behind. I'm glad you was getting dropped out the sky because you was on there. Yeah, you know what it is, DEI.
Hey, so listen, let me tell a quick story. So we're boarding the plane in Atlanta, Eric, and everybody's rushing because again the plane is delayed. And I have a center seat, and my wife, she has a window seat.
Okay.
And then there's another woman who's to my right in the aisle.
Right.
Her husband is across the aisle, right? So they, for whatever reason, they couldn't sit together. And so folks are trying to come in onto the plane, and there was the flight attendant, female, African American.
Okay.
She was helping people put their luggage, and she was helping people put their luggage up in the containers,
storage bins,
right. So she needed to go back to the front of the plane, and so she kind of leaned over into the seated area, looked down the aisle, saw a gentleman who was just coming onto the plane. Excuse me, sir, could you wait right there for a moment and I will come up to the front and allow these people to pass through. He said, what? He said, could you wait right there for a moment? I'll come to the front. He said, that's not my job. She says, what? He said, I don't work for Delta. And our whole group was like, oh, here we go.
You right, bro?
Right?
Did you hear her?
So he just continues to walk.
Right.
She says, flight attendant, it's okay. You can go ahead by. Right. Obviously, you have to get to your seat. Right. The woman next to me says to him as he gets to us. Right. Says, that was rude. Right. And he says, what? Says she was asking you to hold up so that she can come to the front and escort the other guests to the plane.
Oh my goodness.
I told her it wasn't my job. My job is not to wait. And the three dudes behind us, right? These are seasoned businessmen. Right. All of them gray hair. They raised up.
Okay.
They raised up. And so I went on to put on my earbuds because I'm a DEI pilot or passenger.
Right. Yeah, you don't want me getting involved. Everybody else got it. Okay, good.
I see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil.
This is not gonna be good.
Right. I was damn near up with the pilot, like, hey man, we need to go ahead and take off. Right. So in anywho, wow. I thought of that. I mean, I didn't think of that scenario. It just happened. And then I thought of our guest today, and we'll get to your day too.
Wow.
But I thought that mental health or mental illness is real.
Yeah.
You never know where people are. Sure.
That's a good point, Tommy. Right.
And so I had to manage my own emotional intelligence.
Right.
This woman, again, sitting to my right, she just said, that was rude.
Right.
And she wasn't even rude saying that.
Right.
And so, boy, you never know what type of trick you're going to get out of Cracker Jack box these days.
Absolutely. I'll tell you that I am looking forward to our guest this morning because we are going through trauma as a nation. And people are so focused on their own trauma that it's hard to even consider that somebody else is going through trauma.
Yeah.
I know that in Lincoln Heights, 2 weeks ago, there was the neo-Nazis that came to Lincoln Heights, and then somebody, and there were several of them with swastikas and everything, and they was just calling people the N-word, and and then somebody went online and said, "Hey, I thought y'all was gangsters," and then the whole hood came out. But the crazy part about that was that many Black people in the community were almost about to fight each other. Mm-hmm. Because some were trying to ratchet down the high emotion, and others was like, look, they came to our hood. And so it's hard to always determine what's the right response. I'll share just, about my week, and then we'll look at bringing up our guests, Tommy, and letting you introduce them, and they'll introduce themselves a little further. A couple of things I did this week. I was on a podcast yesterday in Africa.
Wow.
So I was pleased and that's one of the things that we were talking about. They sort of found my music, and they wanted to sort of talk about my music and how do you work that in with DEI. And then I know that you've done some things in the past around youth violence. And so they were asking me about that music. So that was a very interesting time. And Tommy, you and I have both been spending time this week on educating people about the real DEI, pivoting. I mean, doing it all. So those are things that but I've got one client right now that is my strongest client. And I changed their diversity council. They'd never had one, but I changed it from a diversity council to a core council about 5 years ago. Core stands for culture, ownership, respect, and engagement, because my spidey senses had a sense that we were going to be headed down this street. And I'll tell you, that core council is powerful. The CEO said, not only am I going to be the sponsor for the core council, but I'm going to serve on the core council. So the CEO of the company's been on the council, senior vice president of HR is on the council. But now, Tommy, we have the president of the union and the vice president of the union. Oh,
wow, Eric.
So we got the CEO, vice president of HR, president of the union, and vice president of the union are all a part of this core council. And I'll tell you, the vice president of the union, a good old boy, but a good guy, said, look, I've heard a lot about the core council. He said, but what I'm seeing and experience is completely different than what I've heard. He said, this is beautiful, and I'm going to tell everybody about it.
Yes.
And so I just grateful, Tommy, that in the midst of all this confusion, those of us that have been doing this work, double down, triple down on the work. Doesn't matter what we call it at the end of the day. We're trying to get people to respect each other, to value each other. We're trying to create workplaces that are fair and equitable. And as long as you keep doing that, you can outlast the storm.
Yeah, that's a great story, Eric. And we are excited today. We want to invite our community as well. Kendall, good to see you, right? And all of those who are going to be joining and will be listening in. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe, because we want you to know when we are going to have our diversity conversations. In diversity conversations, Eric, as you know, and our community knows, we talk all things about all people in our organizations. So it's not just one topic, it's a plethora of topics over the last 7 years, doing this every Saturday morning, right? North of 300 episodes. We want to thank you, community, for sticking in there with us.
And we're ranked third in the world.
Yes.
Of inclusion podcasts of the world globally.
Hey, that's when you're proud. That's when you're very, very proud to get the bronze medal.
That's right. That's right, because it's global.
We are number 3.
It does sound like, what was it, a green? No, it wasn't green.
It's bronze.
It was yellow.
It's yellow. Yellow ribbon.
Blue, green, yellow. You didn't like the yellow ribbon. We got one, though.
But mom and dad was still proud of us and put it on the refrigerator, right?
For a day.
But we have a blue ribbon award-winning gold medalist with us today. We'll bring Ross Meyer to the stage, our guest for today and our diversity conversations. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Great to see you, Tommy and Eric.
Yes.
Great to see you. Great to see you. And so as we talked about prior to the show, we want to say again, thank you for joining this morning, and wanted really to turn it over to you to have you introduce yourselves to our great people across the nation, across the world, and then really give us some background on not only who you are, but what you do, and even who you work with, if you want to do that.
Awesome. Well, it's such an honor to be with you both this morning. The third best in the world, the third best podcast, and I'm a guest.
We get the number one, but we're happy, right? And it's a real organization. We did discover that.
That's amazing. A 7-year run. So congrats to both of you for having important conversations, right? And getting it out in the world. And many deeply thanks for the work that you do. I've gotten to work with Tommy, and I know Eric of your good work. And it's just such an honor to share some time with you both this morning and talk about what's going on in the world and how do we make sense of it. And especially how are our kids making sense of it, right? Because they're watching. Right. So a little bit about me, born and raised here in Cincinnati. And, from a very early age, Tommy and Eric developed a deep passion for justice. Right. I had a mentor early in my life who really helped me understand my privileges and my responsibilities. Right. That came with that and put me on a path from as early as a teenager to where I am today. So my whole path has been kind of meandering, right? I've spent time in nonprofits, in philanthropy, in government, but the through line has always been how do I create a more fair and just opportunity for everyone in this community, especially those where that opportunity has been denied, right? And that's taken a lot of different forms. I worked on a lot of different issues from workforce development to poverty alleviation, and now working on mental health. But the through line has always been how can we, as a community, come together and work collaboratively to tackle some of the biggest, wicked problems that our community is facing in a way that really makes a measurable difference, especially for the populations that are most marginalized. So I'm excited to be a part of this conversation with you, share a little bit about our work at Interact for Health and what we're learning about what's going on in the mental health space in our community and what's working. What are our youth asking for? And what can we do as adults to show up differently for our young people?
Yeah, Ross, I'm very familiar with Interact for Health and the wonderful work that the organization has been doing for a number of years. Nearly 30 years, nearly three decades. We know that, as you mentioned, there's a high need to ensure some form of health care, health equity, and again, attention to our not only less fortunate or less assessed citizens, those who have that limited accessibility to the same benefits and care and treatment that others might have. But we know that with Interact for Health, it looks at the community as a whole. And so not segregate a community from, we're just going to support this one side, et cetera. Can you share a little bit more about what Interact for Health is and kind of some of its pillars or goals?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, we're about 30 years old, been a part of this community. We are a foundation, right? But even more than a foundation who makes grants, we're a change maker, right? We are focused squarely on how do we support our community in creating a more healthy and thriving community for everyone. In our tri-state region, right? So we serve a 20-county, tri-state, greater Cincinnati region. And throughout our whole history, it's always been, what are the greatest health challenges that our community is facing? And how can we partner together with boots on the ground to really make a measurable difference in improving the health for everyone? Tommy, I'd like to start a little bit with kind of sharing how we think about health, and what shapes health, right? Because oftentimes folks think about doctors, right, hospitals and health care. And obviously the provision of health care, right, and your ability to access it and afford it is hugely important, right? But what the research shows is that what's more important, vastly more important than healthcare, are the conditions around us, right? the neighborhoods that we live in, our ability to access a good job that can provide a living wage and health insurance, right? Our ability to access good education that can set us up for our future, our ability to access healthy food, right? And as we well know, that opportunity, right, to make the healthy choice is vastly different across our region, neighborhood to neighborhood. And that results in, every time I see this statistic, it's still shocking. Between neighborhoods in our community, just Greater Cincinnati, there is a 26-year difference in life expectancy, just miles apart, right?
Wow.
Price Hill to Mount Adams, right? Avondale to Indian Hill, right? 26 years that you can expect to, and think about how much life, right? I've lived in the last 26 years, right? I've had 3 kids. I married my wife, right? Much of my life has happened in the last 26 years. Can you just it's still shocking that in this country, right? The richest country in the world, just miles apart, that you can expect to live 26 years less based on the opportunities that are afforded to you in that neighborhood. That has nothing to do with even access to healthcare, right? Avondale's right next to the best healthcare in the world. It's about the conditions in the neighborhood, right? And those conditions, as we know, have been shaped for years, centuries of whether it's underinvestment or explicit, right, systemic racism that have dramatically shaped the opportunities that now shape people's health today, right? So when we think about, this is important kind of framing, I think, because when we think about mental health, right, the factors that shape our mental health are the same factors that shape our physical health, right? The conditions around us, and how do we change those conditions so that they're not so stressful, right? They're not putting undue stress on some of us, right? But how we think about health is important, Tommy, because oftentimes people just blame individuals for poor health, right? They're making bad choices, right? They just need to eat better, exercise more, see the doctor more. That's part of it. Of course, it's part of it. But 80-90% of it is not that. It's about the opportunities that we're afforded based on where we live, right? Based on our zip code, not our genetic code. So that's just, I think, important to understand.
Yeah. Let me jump in and ask you a question. Because for me, people don't care about things if they don't think that they impact them. But I would say that if people just miles away from us have 26-year less life expectancy, what's the cost of that on the broader community? I would say that the other thing is that when we don't really realize, nobody wants to take responsibility for that. So that's the other part. It's kind of like, what is the impact on us? But then if you say systemic racism and all that, people just run away from you.
Sure.
Yeah, how can we help people understand what role they have? Because the invisible hand of bias is what continues while they're trying to take down DEI, because it's named, it's the invisible hand of the isms that maintain these kind of things.
That's right. You made a lot of good points there, Eric.
So starting with what is the
cost? I mean, the cost is, we at Interact, and me personally, come at this, right, with a deep belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, right? And that every single person deserves the opportunity for a healthy and a full and thriving life. That argument will only get you so far, right, in many circles. For those where the dollars matter, right? The cost is significant to all of us, right? And that shows up in a lot of ways. It shows up in increased healthcare costs, right? It shows up in social service costs. It shows up in crime costs, right? I mean, we as taxpayers are paying that cost for those ongoing disparities. That affects every single one of us, right? Whether you believe it's fair or not, we're all paying for that disparity. And how much of a more thriving economy could we have if everyone was able to contribute all that they had, right? And chronic health issues didn't get in the way, or mental illness didn't get in their way, right? If we had everybody able to contribute all of their gifts and talents to our economy, that's going to benefit everybody. And, I've seen numbers, I mean, it's in the billions, right? Even just for our economy, greater Cincinnati, right? If we were able to reduce some of those gaps, we're going to benefit in the billions in terms of increased economic output, because so many more of us are able to contribute. And that's that matters. That matters to all of us. This isn't just about a social justice crusade, right? Even if it is for me, it is. It's really about making sure that, every single one of us in our community has not only the opportunity, but the ability to contribute all their talents to benefit all of us.
Let me ask you one other question. Yeah. I know Tommy may want to jump in, but part of this hinges on how we humanize or dehumanize people. And so what I've seen is that oftentimes we are blaming people for not having two-parent families. They're just lazy. And you've been at this crossroad. You've seen some people that may have started with just looking at people and blaming them. And then you've seen some of them transform into seeing people in human ways. Can you tell us anything about that transition, what you've seen that has affected people, that they began to see people versus blame people?
We need more of that, Eric. We need more of that understanding. What I've seen, because we're talking about some of the hardest things to change, hearts and minds, right? Mental models, the stories in our heads that help explain the world around us, right? And in this country, that kind of rugged individualism, right, is a story where, your success is dependent on your hard work and effort, right? This is the American story, no matter how flawed we know it is. So to counter that, to say yes, and it depends on the opportunities afforded to us, right? Eric, the only thing that I've seen that actually works is when you get in proximity, when you get in a relationship, when you help people get in relationship with other people, right? I mean, and our society is putting us all in our little echo chambers, right? They're further dividing us in ways that it's harder to get to understand on a human level and connect with people who had a different life experience than we did. And for me, so I grew up in Finneytown, right? Suburbs, pretty sheltered, middle class, upbringing. And it wasn't until a mentor took me down to what was a drop-in homeless shelter, now shelter house, right? When I was 13 years old. And I had a conversation with an African-American woman there who was a resident, and she put me in my place. She's like, you have no idea. We were just having a conversation, right, casually, and I was trying to be polite. I was 13 years old. I had no idea. I had no way to understand what I was experiencing, right? And like a fool, I said at one point, I know what you mean. And Eric, she laid into me. You have no idea.
Right.
You have no idea. You're just, some privileged white kid coming down here to feel good about yourself. You have no idea what it's like to be, Black on the streets in Cincinnati. She just laid into me, and I listened, and I came back almost every day, all through high school, because I wanted to understand how just miles from where I grew up, life experience could be so dramatically different. So I think the only way to do it, honestly, is getting people in relationship with each other, right? Restoring kind of basic human connection across diversity, right? And that's, that I think that's the only way that folks can truly start to understand how life shows up differently for each of us. And I think that's the tallest challenge at the moment, right? Because there's so many forces that are profiting, frankly, from driving us apart and reinforcing our worldviews and kind of reducing opportunities to connect as human beings with each other, right? And I think the more that we can build basic human relationships across difference, I think that's the first step.
Yeah, and Ross, I think that what you're sharing is profound, powerful. I'm learning as I'm listening as well. And we have our community who's across the nation, different cities, probably the same issues, same concerns. From your seat and in strategy, what are some of the steps that we can take, right? You mentioned some barriers. What are some of the next steps, some action steps, strategies to really begin to address systemically and sustainably the issues that we're facing?
Yeah, sure. So I'll talk kind of broadly, and then let's talk more about the mental health issue in particular, right? Because that's where I'm spending a lot of my time and effort, really thinking about how do we change the conditions, right, that are shaping mental health today. I mean, more broadly, so Interact, we focus on three kind of key pillars towards this broad vision of how do we create a more fair and just opportunity for everyone in our community to have a full life, regardless of who they are or where they live, right? That's the North Star that we're aiming for. And we're trying to do that in three ways. One is the work that I'm focused on about changing the conditions that shape mental health, especially for young people. That we've learned deeply from our community is one of the most pressing challenges that we could tackle today. And I'll share more about that in a minute. But beyond that, we think it really gets down to who is at the table deciding on the issues that are affecting their community. So in our world, we call this about building the agency, the capacity, the power of the communities that have been most marginalized to shape their destiny. So what that looks like, Eric, at the top of this conversation, you're talking about Lincoln Heights, right? Historically Black, proud neighborhood where the Nazis showed up and got shushed away because the neighborhood organized, right? Lincoln Heights is one of our partners that we've been investing in to build, because they're organized. They have a plan for their community. And our role is to resource them, help them get what they need to act on that plan and get out of the way. Lincoln Heights, we have partners in Middletown. We have partners that are working along the Beekman corridor in Cincinnati, kind of Millvale, South Cumminsville area. And we're trying to find those that are organizing on the ground to really help their community act on their own aspirations. And we think once communities have the agency and the power to shape their future, that's where things start to change. So that's long term. I mean, that's going to take generations, honestly. But we think unless we're addressing that root cause issue, and it is about power, who has it, we're only going to be working on the periphery. So that's a big bucket of our work. Another bucket is around policy advocacy, because we know that so many public policies at a state level, at a local level, shape all these conditions around us that give rise for good health, right? Whether it's policies around housing or transportation or the availability of tobacco, right? All these policies have a big impact, right? And no amount of programming, while important, no amount of programming can really reach the scale of impact that we can reach if we can change public policy. So we're resourcing and investing in advocates, right, that are on the ground, that are working on changing public policy that affect all these kind of conditions around us.
Say that again, because you said that it blew by us. You said there's no amount of that can take
programs, right? Like so. Yeah. So
understand that, because that's huge. Because sometimes I think that we can ignore policy and just get out here and get it done. But you're saying something different.
Yeah. Yeah, no, don't get me wrong here. Like we need the programs, right? And I'm talking about food banks, right? Yeah. Smoking cessation programs, job training programs, right? All these really important, and we have some of the best organizations, I'd say, in the country doing that work here. And they're providing life-saving services, right, for people. We need that. But if we stop there, right, we're not going to ultimately change the story, right? We're just going to keep handing out food or helping people get a job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How can we change the policies, right, that are giving rise to the very issues, right, that they're trying to address? So, oftentimes philanthropy, the charitable sector, just stops at just supporting the good programs, right? And that's, again, important, necessary, but that doesn't lead to fundamental change. That doesn't change the conditions of our community in a way that's sustainable. The more that we can, granted, it's a hard environment right now to think about policy change and making a difference, but we have to keep in that fight, because if we can change policies that can shape more availability of housing that's affordable to everybody in our community, right, that's going to go much farther than building more homeless shelters, for example. It's an important distinction, Eric, because so much of philanthropy and charitable efforts are focused on kind of addressing the symptom, right, through a program here or there. And again, I don't want to minimize too much, because that's necessary.
Not minimizing. I think but here's what I would say. My mind is kind of run down the street a little bit in terms of you all's knowledge and how that can be applied to the times that we're living in. Because right now we're struggling. I think mental health is a big deal. We want to certainly put up most of our focus there. But I think there's this balance that needs to happen between people coming together, working with each other to make change, but also then make change around policy. We're seeing policies that are being torn back.
Yeah.
So part of the question is, if those policies are being reversed, are there things that we can still do as people? I think you're right. Tommy and I say it all the time. Events and activities don't change the culture of an organization. So we're in total agreement with you there.
That's
but
right.
What do you see around the balancing between us being energized around getting the policies right, but then us sort of collectively coming together and putting our efforts?
It really is a both and, Eric. And I'm not one to say what do we need more of right now over the other, because we do need both. And especially now where there's so much pain, right, and suffering, we need those efforts that are stopping the bleeding, right? We need those efforts that are providing support, emergency kind of mental health services to address the trauma that so many communities are facing right now. Like we need that. And a lot of folks can't wait for us to win the policy change that's going to take 5-10 years. Like, I mean, to be honest, right, this is long haul kind of work, right? And we're seeing a dramatic response to progress that had been made, right, over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so we got to keep the kind of long haul focus on how do we lay the groundwork for the long-term changes that we need to see, but acknowledge that there's so much pain and suffering right now that communities need us to show up, and they need support because folks can't wait for the long-term change to come. A lot of folks are unfortunately disillusioned with our system, our political system that can deliver change. So we got to figure out how to reclaim that sense of democracy, that we can be a part of that change. But so I'm not answering your question completely, but I think we need both. I think we need both, and I think we need to listen to those closest. Right, those are facing the most pain as to what they need right now.
I love that. Here's a question from one of our community members. And I'll tell you, wherever you can share stories about real people, I mean, not names and things like that, that helps people to really get bought into this whole thing. So as you think about this question, what kind of tools do you use to guide a youth to be their best version of themselves, to motivate them, to empower them? If you can think of any examples of young people that you all have worked with, that can be helpful too.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit, and I'll get to that. That's a great question. Let's talk a little bit about what we're learning in the youth mental health space. And, because this is an area that when we were going through our strategic planning a couple of years ago, just really rose to the top. Every conversation we had in the community, every bit of data we looked at, right? This issue screamed at us that we need urgent action, and not just because of the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic had a dramatic impact on all of our mental health, right? If you came out of that unchanged, then I don't know how, I don't know who you are. But for our young people in particular, as they're going through really critical developmental years, it took a big toll, and that toll has not gotten significantly better since the pandemic. But the important thing to know is that we were already on a trend over the last decade before COVID of young people reporting really significantly high amounts of anxiety, depression, social isolation, right? Stress that they couldn't manage, and unfortunately suicide. So those trends had been already on the uptick over the last decade, and then COVID just supercharged it, right? And it hasn't gotten much better since then. So this was clearly an issue that we needed to lean in on. And we started by listening to young people, right? Asking, having a lot of conversations with young people all across our community as to what's going on here and why, and what does help look like, right? What needs to be different? That's really important to us to listen directly, right, to those who are experiencing the issue, to really gain a deeper insight, right? And, Eric, what we heard time and time again from young people, which I think was pretty profound. Like, we came at this thinking like they need more mental health treatment, they need more therapy, which is, yes, that's part of it, right? They need more access to therapy, and therapy is really unaffordable and inaccessible and not culturally relevant, right? There's a lot of problems in the mental health treatment system, and we thought our mental model at the time was we need to fix that, right? We need everyone should be able to have access to a therapy that's affordable with somebody that looks like them, that can relate to their story. And while that's all true, what young people said was, I don't just need more therapy. I don't need to be fixed. That was a big insight. So I don't need to be fixed. What needs to be fixed are the conditions. They didn't say it in these words, but frankly, the adults around me that are creating this problem, right? Wow. At school, right? At home. Parents or grandparents that still stigmatize, don't talk about mental health, or just tell you to pray on it, right? So the ongoing stigma is not affecting their generation. Their generation is talking about mental health, they're normalizing it, right? It's our generation that continues to have a problem dealing with and acknowledging that we all have mental health. This is part of all of our lives, right? And just like we need to go attend to our teeth with our dentist and get our physical every year, we need to tend to our mental health. Like, this we shouldn't think of these things separately, but we're still dealing with that, historical stigma. So young people said, work on your own issues first. Like, work on your own issues. How do you deal with your own traumas, right? And need to wrestle with your mental health so you can show up for us in the ways that we need you to, as a supportive adult, as a trusted adult, where I can share my emotions with and be acknowledged and validated and not judged, right? That's what they're asking for. They want the adults in their lives, whether it's their family or their teachers or their faith community or their coaches. What young people are asking for are for the adults in their lives to be a supportive, trusted, safe adult. So we've been doing a lot of work to really understand and work with them. So let's define that. Like, what does that actually mean? How does that show up for you? What behaviors? And it is about being, non-judgmental, right? It's about validating what they're experiencing. It's about providing, guidance as appropriate. But importantly, it's not about minimizing what they're going through or saying that, I went through that, or this is just part of adolescence. I mean, the world today that teenagers are growing up in is fundamentally different than the world that we grew up in, right? The amount of information coming at them, the amount of negativity coming at them is just dramatically different, right? And technology has a big part of this, right? Our smartphones are just a constant feed of distraction and negativity and comparison, right? That's a big part of it. But there are other factors just in the world around us. I was just thinking about, as you two were sharing your stories, Tommy, you on your flight this morning, and Eric, you're talking about Lincoln Heights. Kids are watching. Kids are watching, and it's not a good picture of what they're watching, what they're learning from the adults around us about how we function in society, right? This level of incivility to like just outright, right, emboldened hate. It's not a good picture. So I think what's really interesting is that by listening to young people, they kind of flipped it and said, work on yourselves, work on yourselves. So what that looks like is very specifically working with schools, for example, because obviously our young people spend a lot of time in schools, and we're working to really partner with schools to really look at how do you, and you do this in the workplace, right? What are all the policies, programs, practices that make up the environment that either promote wellness or not? It's the same thing within the school setting, and we're looking at it from a lens of what are those parts of the school environment that we can help them shape that can be more conducive to the students' mental health and well-being, right? How do you tend to the teachers' mental health and well-being, right? Because they're burned out and asked to be a social worker and a therapist and a teacher, and how do we tend to that so that they can show up better for their students? How do we look at discipline practices, right? So that discipline is not punishing, a mental health issue, and actually getting kids the kind of support that they need. So part of it is looking at how do we shape the environment right around young people? How do we partner with schools to do that? And then also working with all the organizations that are in the lives of young people, right? From mentoring organizations to YMCAs and community rec centers to athletic organizations, to really start to, with our young people, defining clearly, here's what it means to be a safe and trusted adult. How do we then kind of upskill all of us that are in the lives of young people to do that? We're just starting that journey right now, but the idea is, how do we get all on the same page? The adults that are in the lives of young people right now around what it really means to be a safe and trusted adult, so that we can all show up better for the young people that are in our lives. So again, I'm not a therapist, so I'm not going to provide the kind of guidance that I think others could around what it needs. But on the base level, what we hear time and again from young people is they want to be in a relationship, and they want adults that are safe and that are trusted and can validate and show up for them, right, in a non-judgmental way. And isn't that what we all need, right, in our lives, in the relationships that we have and the connections that we have? And they're seeking that just like we're all seeking that. And again, I think this gets down to, our fundamental need for human connection. And there's so many forces in our society that are driving disconnection, right? So the more that we can really foster relationship and a sense of safety, I think that's what we've learned. I think most importantly from young people as to what they're asking for.
Yeah, Ross, and again, I'm finding this conversation to be very informative, insightful, and as I am listening, I am self-reflecting as well. So I too believe that a lot of the experiences and opportunities that our young people are going through is because the generation and generations before have created those environments. I honestly believe that the adults, if you will, we have created we have traumatized our young people. If it's technology, for example, and we can blame technology, it's the adults. It's this generation, the previous generations that created the technology. The current generation are simply using the technology. They were born into it. That's all they know. Right? Yep. And so our generation and generations before us, we were not taught how to text. We were not taught how to manage and leverage artificial intelligence or Google. We just jumped into that wormhole. And we ourselves, I think, became two things. One, I think that we lost our own ability to understand our reality. I really did. I think that the times have moved so fast and so quickly with so much change that even the adults, the youth, parents,
Right.
we just were reacting.
Right. And we're so busy, this thing can babysit our kid.
Yep.
Yeah. Put this in front of, okay, do this.
And there it is. There it is. There's all the answers, because then part two is I either don't know all the answers, or I am simply going to my go-to solution, right? It could be philanthropy. It could be directing you to the phone. It can be blaming or shaming. Or I, as the adult, have not truly reflected on how I contribute to the situation, the event. So that's one of the questions from our community is we ask, what's my contribution to this? Right? What is it? I believe that we have to self-assess where that contribution is, because you and Interact for Health and Eric and I and others, we can go to these organizations and talk to adults. But if the adults are the ones that are in denial, not my fault,
Right.
It's not our
Right.
fault, it's
Right.
them.
Right.
We then blame the youth,
Right.
blaming our children, and give it 10 years, give it 20 years, and we'll see the results of that blame.
That's right.
And again and again. That's just my commentary as I get frustrated a bit on full transparency. And I love what you do, and I love what you're saying. But I'm just thinking through my head that I know a lot of people who have a lot of answers, but are not doing anything with them.
Yeah.
Right? Right? So that, and myself included. So I just like, who can I connect with? So if you were a Joe Citizen, right? Nancy Neighbor, if you're these two people, what would you recommend to us and how we can be a part of this solution and not continue the spiral of problems, challenges, and issues?
Yeah, Tommy, I think you said it well. We got to start with ourselves, right? Because we're not well, and it's no wonder, right? I mean, the especially the last couple of weeks. I mean, I just felt the world shifting so dramatically. Like, how do I keep grounded? How do I make sense of everything that's happening? So, like, it's no wonder that folks are having a hard time coping because the pace of change is just dramatic. So I think it goes down to looking in the mirror and doing our own work to start with, right? And that's what young people are asking us to do as well. And that looks different for a lot of us, So the former Surgeon General, talked about an epidemic of loneliness.
Yes,
Connection.
I remember that.
Wow.
Shocking numbers of folks that don't have a close connection, right, that they can rely on in their life. I'm talking about everybody, adults, right? And the steps that we can take to just start to rebuild some of those ties, right? Reach out to someone you haven't talked to in a couple of years, right? I mean, Tommy, when you reached out to me, I was delighted to hear from you. We haven't connected in a while. And I was like, I mean, these kind of even informal connections or strong connections that you just lost out of touch, like, just take the step to every day, take 15 minutes to just send a text, say, hey, I'm thinking about you. What's new, right? That goes a long way to just start to rebuild our sense of connection and relationship with people. And that's going to have a huge impact on our own sense of mental health and groundedness, right? So tend to your own connections, right? And let's all be a part of starting to rebuild, right, that kind of fabric right, of our community through relationship. And then I think the other thing that we can do, again, is tend to our own mental health, right? Again, it's our generation that continues to minimize or stigmatize mental health is just not a part of life. And let me be clear. We should have started with this of like defining mental health, right? Because it's not about feeling good all the time. It's not about just being positive. It's about feeling all the emotions that are normal in human life and knowing how to cope with them in a healthy way. It's being equipped to deal with whatever life throws your way, right? It's not about just feeling good or bad, right? So I think sometimes we talk about, I think it's oftentimes framed, I think, poorly as just about feeling good or being positive all the time. That's not it.
Right.
Because life is going to throw everything your way, and it's about being able to cope with whatever life gives you. I think we all probably need to do that work, right? No, I mean, we weren't taught that intentionally, really, in many ways. So we should all have, somebody, whether it's a therapist or a faith leader or somebody in our life that we can talk through strategies, methods, right, of how to attend to our own mental health and build those coping skills for ourselves. Because once we can do that, then we can, again, show it better for the others and young people in our life in a way that's going to help them on their own journey. But we got to start at home, Tommy. And I think that's about restoring connection. And I think it's about attending to our own mental wellness.
Let me jump in there, Russ. So first of all, I want you to react to Jamaica's suggestion here. Anything you want to say to that? And then I'm going to ask.
Oh man, I have 3 teenage boys, so it is a constant struggle to help them navigate screen time. And I mean, it's as you were saying, Tommy, we adults built this technology. It's expressly focused on creating addictive habits, right, to generate profit, and it's incredibly effective at doing that. And I fall prey to it all the time, right? So let's be honest about that. So I think any efforts, and I don't know this particular app, but any efforts that can really focus on, and it's not, and I think we don't want to go too far as just saying, cut out the phone. We got to help young people know how to leverage this tool,
right? Exactly,
but not let it leverage them. Right. That's the difference. How do we help them understand how to have a healthy relationship, right, with technology? And there's no question that cutting down the screen time has got to be a part of that. So our schools are taking steps, right? CPS and St. Public is taking steps to limit access to screens and phones during the school day. I think that's a help. I think parents can take steps as well. One resource that I will recommend, the author of a book called The Anxious Generation, tremendous book. And it's all about how technology over the years has fundamentally rewired the brains and the experience of youth. And the author, Jonathan Haidt, Haidt, if you just Google The Anxious Generation, has some very practical tips for parents. So specific that, I think one of the recommendations is, right, no phones, period, until maybe 12, somewhere around there. No access to social media until maybe 16. And then some other, very specific guidelines based on science that can help parents know what's appropriate. And I got this wrong, right, with my kids. And I think every parent is trying to figure out what's the right healthy balance here. So whether it's, setting specific limits on screen time, or other strategies that limit access to certain social media, I think that's all got to be part of the mix of how we figure out how to help young people navigate this, because it's a huge factor that's shaping their experience, right?
Let me put this in here. So adults are struggling themselves, as we've said before. They're stressed out. They're being overrun by negativity, and their finances are compromised. They're low. And so oftentimes they look at this and say, how do I get out of this? Because I can't actually afford to pay for the help that I need. And then that makes me diminished in terms of trying to help my child. The one thing I would say to you about President Trump, he is the master of simple messages and driving them over and over and over again until finally everybody else is saying that. Are there any simple messages that we could drive in this space that would help people sort of 1, 2, 3? Think of these things that would help us to get a message of the importance of health and mental health delivered to people. Because if we make it too many steps or too many things, they can't recall it. If you had 2 or 3 key messages that you'd say, let's drive this over and over.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's a great question. Let me think on that, Eric. I'm trying to think about how to be as pithy, right? Right. But I mean, I think the 3 things. I think they're the things. Some of the things we talked about, right? I think the first one is heal thyself, right? Attend to yourself, and whatever that looks like, whether it's therapy or just reinvesting in relationships that fill you up, right? I think you got to start by looking in the mirror. I think the second is about restoring connection, right? Because again, humans need humans. People need each other. There's so much that's driving us apart that the simple things that we can do every day, right? To just start rebuilding those ties with loose connections or strong connections, whatever it looks like, so that we have people in our life that we can count on and that we have a deep relationship with. Those simple steps can make, I think, a massive amount of difference. So restore connection, I think, is the other. On the third level, I think, I don't know. I want to say
I've got a third one for you.
You got a third one? Yeah.
Yes. Track the positive impact and pass that on.
Yeah.
So you said heal thyself. Love that. Restore connections, and then track. So as you're doing these things, track the positive impact so you can share that.
You can spread it.
It's kind of like a testimony. People need to know that people are doing things and that they're having a positive impact.
That's right. I love that. That's a great one.
Yeah.
We did it.
We did.
Pass it on. Pass it on is the third one. Heal thyself, restore connection, pass it on.
Right.
There you go.
Because
that's a recipe for progress.
Yeah, because we're in trouble right now as a nation, as a world. What you're doing is hugely important. Are there any sort of final messages that it's just blew by. This hour just blew by. We'll have to bring you back. But what would be some final messages that you want to share with our community?
I think, Eric, we summed it up well. I think just having just a recognition that each and every one of us need to really, especially at a time when the world is so seemingly unhinged, right? And there's so much that's changing dramatically. We need to really focus on how to stay grounded and connected to people that fill us up. And that's, I feel like the only way through this is together. And honestly, I think that the more that we can start to be in relationship with people that aren't like us, right? That think differently, that have different lived experiences. That's got to be part of how we move forward as a country. Because I think that so much of what we're experiencing now is a result of so much disconnection and us kind of retreating into our little silos, echo chambers, technology just kind of fueling and feeding off of that fundamentally, when folks are in relationship with each other, right, all that stuff goes away. All the judgments, right, the prejudices fall away when you actually have a relationship with somebody who's different. And it sounds basic and trite, but we got to get back to that, because I think only through that kind of proximity, right, and that relationship, can we start to make a difference in kind of restoring our community.
Yeah, this is the journey of really connecting back to self, connecting back to, again, positivity, and connecting back to solutions. And I don't want to say that loosely, because I think that we had a disconnect between here's the problem, let's focus on the problem, and disconnect it from let's act towards solution. It was easier, and it has, in my mind, Eric, Ross, it's been easier in the last several years to just blame, shame, and victimize.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
Easier
right.
to point the fingers at the other people, other communities, other world, until it comes home. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming home is right in our own families. The issues of mental illness, the issues of inaccessibility to any resources. Once our children, our spouses, our loved ones, our neighbors cannot get it, then it's personal. As you said, Eric, the most important issue is the issue that's most important to us. I think this was an important conversation.
Ross, this was an important conversation. You've given Tommy and I something to think about, our community something to think about. I'll tell you, I'm an action-oriented person. So when I hear some things, man, I start thinking, what's the action that we can take? So this notion of heal thyself and messaging around how to help people heal themselves, restoring connections and passing it on. I was a part of the Black Male Coalition with Senator Bowen, when he was alive. We had thousands of members there. I started something called the Community of Friends, a group that met monthly for 10 years. And Beautiful. The power of those men meeting with each other was amazing. And I think, Tommy, that's what's needed right now. While everybody's bemoaning the demise of DEI, we've got to look at how do we restore connections so that people can rise above the hopelessness that's out there. If you can't get the adults healed, then you're not going to be very effective at healing the young people. And you've given us that today.
Spot on.
Tommy, you've got the last word.
So I think that's our time for today. We want to thank Ross Meyer, who's the Vice President in Strategy at Interact for Health and a good friend of mine. Good man, good brother.
So much appreciate our time together. Just sharing this space has been beautiful and healing.
Absolutely. So we would like to invite our community to again join us on the next episode of
Diversity Conversations. Take care.
Bye now.